Hello, and thank you for joining me. Today, we're returning to Fallout 76, where we're going to spend another 1,000 scrip with the Purveyor on 3-star ranged legendary weapons, and as always, I'll take a few moments to talk about each one, about what makes it good, bad, or mediocre, indifferent, whatever. So let's go on ahead and get started and see what we get today. So for our first roll, we got a Stalkers Ultrasight Gatling laser with 25% faster fire rate and plus 50 damage resistance while aiming. So this one right here is, excuse me, very disappointing because the Ultrasight Gatling laser is a solid weapon. You definitely want the Ultrasight version, not the regular version, because it does do a little bit better damage. And the 25% faster fire rate on this thing, which already has a very high fire rate, is very strong. So that's very good. Unfortunately, the Stalkers effect is probably the worst, at least in my opinion, of all of the first-star ranged legendary weapon effects in the game at this point. Basically, in my experience with testing with it, you do not get 100% accuracy with VATS when you're not in combat, like it says. I have missed. It's not a whole lot that you miss with the Stalker's effect, but you do still miss, so it's not plus 100%. I would expect 100% to be automatic hit, and it does cost the extra AP cost. So, with this weapon, you're probably not going to be using VATS a whole lot anyway, so it's more or less just like not having a first star at all on this weapon. If this was a rifle or something like that, it would actually be a little bit more like a debuff in my opinion, but overall it's just kind of like not having a first star at all. And then the third star, plus 50 damage resistance while aiming, is not amazing. If you have a damage resistance in the neighborhood of 300 to 400 or above, you're going to start seeing some very diminishing returns when you're adding additional damage resistance to that. It's also worth noting that this is only damage resistance, not energy resistance, so it does not provide you any extra protection against, laser weapons, plasma weapons, or at least the energy side of them, and so on and so forth. So, it's not a great third star, but it's not the worst third star by any means, and if the first star was much better, then this could actually be a very solid weapon. Unfortunately, because the first star is Stalkers, and the third star is pretty meaningless as well, it's really just script trash right here. But anyway, let's go on ahead and move on to the next one and see what we get. So here we've got an Executioner's Salvage Assaultron head with replenishing action points with each kill and 90% reduced weight. So the Executioner's effect is an interesting effect because it's actually very powerful in that, unlike all of the other legendary effects, at least the first stars on weapons in the game, it is actually multiplicative instead of additive, which means that 50% extra damage is 50% of what you see on the damage card, not the base damage of the weapon. So that's very powerful, with the, of course, drawback being that it does absolutely nothing until your target is at 40% or less health, actually below, so 39% or less. So, in the right situation, it's a very good effect. It can be very good against bosses and bigger enemies. Enemies that you typically take down in 1 or 2 shots, it's typically not going to do a whole lot for you. And it's really kind of meaningless on the Salvage Assaultron head because you really, if you're using the Salvage Assaultron head, you really do want to be getting as many one-hit kills as possible, because no matter how many rounds you load into it, you're going to be emptying them all in a single shot, so you are absolutely going to have to reload it after every shot. So that's definitely a big drawback, not to mention that the Salvage Assaultron head is a very buggy weapon. Sometimes it does very good damage, or at least the numbers show it does very good damage, but yet the enemy's health bar barely moves at all. So overall, this weapon, just the base weapon itself, even a non-legendary version, is just not good, and then the Executioner's effect does not go well with this weapon at all. The replenishing action points with each kill, well, I guess if you're using VATS with this thing and getting some hits with it and actually being able to kill things with it, then getting some more action points with each kill would be a good thing. But again, I don't think that that's going to be doing a whole lot for you on this particular weapon. And the 90% reduced weight is most definitely the most beneficial effect on this weapon, because that means it's not taking up a ton of weight in my inventory until I get around to scripting it. So, yeah, let's go on ahead and see if maybe Murmur will give us something a little better today. Well, this is not really it. We got a Suppressor's Bow with replenishing action points with each kill, and hits having a chance to generate a stealth field. So the Suppressor's effect is kind of interesting because it does actually do what it says on the box, as best as I can tell anyway from my testing, and from what I've seen from other content creators, it does seem to do what it says. But I just don't think that there's a lot of situations in the game where you really are better off trying to reduce the opponent's damage output as opposed to just trying to kill them as quickly as possible. Maybe against some endgame bosses, but even then, if you've got a good build, then you can typically take a few hits from whether it be Earl or the Scorchbeast Queen, or, you know, maybe not so much the Death Ray from the from Encrypted event, from the Imposter Sheep Squatch, but in general, if you've got a decent build, you can take a little bit of a beating from most of the endgame bosses anyway. So the Suppressor's effect is not doing a whole lot. Maybe at some point Bethesda will add a boss or some encounter or something in the game where you really do need to reduce the target's damage output to have much of a chance of surviving. And at that point, the Suppressor's effect could become a lot more interesting. As it stands right now, it's just kind of in my opinion. The replenishing action points with each kill, that is a very solid effect. It's not one of my absolute favorites because my builds are generally based around, you know, keeping their own AP high without needing a legendary effect to do that. But even so, it's still a very solid effect. And I don't think that this is the weapon that you're really going to get the most out of it, though, because you're going to have to reload after every shot because it's a bow, and you're only going to have one arrow knocked at a time. But if you drop out of VATS, and I guess there's the drawback of it resetting your concentrated fire. So if you're trying to get some accuracy bonuses that way, then this is a bit of a drawback. But the way I typically play is drop out of VATS between shots with slow firing weapons like this when I'm reloading, or really any time that I'm reloading, so that my AP can be regenerating at that time. So if you're doing it that way, then this bow is really not going to be running out of AP if you've got even a half decent build for AP. So the second star is probably not going to do a whole lot. Hits having a chance to generate a stealth field. It could be useful on this if you're having trouble staying in stealth, but the Suppressor's Bow, or the bow in general, is actually a silent weapon. It's not even suppressed, it's silent. So shouldn't have too much difficulty staying in stealth with this weapon if you've got a half-decent build. But, you know, if you are having some difficulty, or if you just, you know, want to sacrifice a little bit of the stealth perks or things like that for other more useful perks or whatever, then you might find that third star a little bit useful. But overall, this thing is pretty unexciting. Let's go on ahead and see what else we can get. And we got ourselves another bow. So this one's actually a little bit better, though. Here we've got an Instigating Bow with plus 25% damage while aiming and plus 1 agility. So the Instigating effect got nerfed a while back. It's no longer double the damage that it says on the card. It's double the base damage of the weapon. It would be nice if it was a little bit more clear on that, but if you've done anything like taken perks or mutations, chems, anything at all that gives you some sort of a damage bonus on your damage card there, then that is not going to be factored into the extra damage that you're getting from the Instigating effect. That said, the bow does have a high enough base damage that even doubling the base damage of the weapon is beneficial and will definitely help you get more of those one-shot kills, which is definitely the kind of thing that you want with these slower firing weapons like the Instigating Bow, for example. So that's a good thing there. Not the best first star, but not the worst by any means here. And then plus 25% damage while aiming. For me, that's a little bit disappointing because I would probably use the VATS primarily use the bow primarily in VATS because I'm a VATS junkie, what can I say? But also, for me, I would have a much better chance of actually hitting my target that way. So I wouldn't see much benefit from this second star. But if you're the type of player who prefers to aim down the sights as opposed to using VATS, even when you're using something like a bow or rifles or whatever, then that could be a very strong effect for you, and that could pair very well with the Instigating effect to help you get even more of those one-shot kills, which, again, is very much what you want with these slow-firing weapons. Plus 1 agility is not terrible. I don't think anyone's going to complain about getting some more agility or really any of their specials, but it's not doing a whole lot for you. A single point in a special is not giving you huge bonuses. Agility is going to give you a little bit more stealth, which is a good thing, especially if you're using a bow. You're probably going to be using stealth with that build, and so a little bit more stealth isn't a bad thing by any means. And it also gives you a little bit more action points, which isn't going to do much with this particular bow if you're using it to its fullest. In other words, using it by aiming it down the sights instead of VATS. But at the same time, it'll still let you sprint around and things like that more freely. So overall, this one is probably on the little bit higher side of mediocre, at least as far as bows go. It's definitely not a god roll by any means, but I could see the right player finding some use for it. So, not the worst thing ever. Let's go on ahead and see what else we get. And here we've got a bloodied short pump action shotgun with VATS critical hits doing plus 50% damage and your VATS critical meter filling 15% faster. So this one is actually very interesting. The bloodied effect is, in my opinion, the best effect, at least in general, for first stars for weapons in the game. I'm a low health build for most of my characters, actually all my characters generally, but I just enjoy the benefits that they provide, and I just like the playstyle. So the extra damage that you get from Bloodied is definitely much higher than you get from really any other effect in the game, so that's also why I think a lot of other players, as well as myself, really appreciate that build. It's definitely a little bit higher risk than some of the others, but it's not that difficult to stay alive with the Bloodied build with the right perks and armor and things like that. So the first star is amazing on this weapon, probably the best you can get in my opinion. The VATS critical hits doing plus 50% damage is a very, very strong effect. The one thing to keep in mind is that the VATS critical hits, they actually bypass the 70% damage reduction on the Scorch Beast Queen and whatever the percentage is on Earl. I don't remember. I think it's higher, but I don't remember what it is. That bypasses that, so you can get some very high damage critical hits on a boss, especially if you've got the VATS critical hits doing plus 50% damage. And a shotgun, you don't even need to be a low health build, although obviously with a bloodied version, you're probably going to be a low health build if you're using this particular shotgun to its fullest potential. But with the right perk loadout, you don't have to be a low health build to be able to crit at least very close to every other shot using the right combination of perks, because of the, I forget the name of the perk, but it's a luck perk that gives you a chance to fill your critical meter with every hit, and you get 8 hits with every shotgun shot, assuming that every one of your pellets hits the target. So you can generate a lot of crits that way and get a lot of extra damage, especially with that second star. And then the VATS critical meter filling 15% faster. It's probably the worst star on this weapon, because if you are a bloodied build, you're probably going to be running unyielding armor if you're using a shotgun, so your luck is already going to be very high. But if you really want the crits, you're probably going to be using, I can't remember the name of that perk, but the perk that gives you a chance to, that I just talked about, that gives you a chance to generate a critical, or fill your critical meter on every hit. So there's a good chance it won't be doing a whole lot for you, but if you're not choosing to optimize for crits, then it will definitely do something for you. So overall, it's not an amazing weapon by any means, but it's definitely solid, and I could definitely see players using it for either some basic daily grinding, or even just a mid-level player using it until they got something better, like maybe an explosive version of this, because an explosive version would definitely be better. So anyway, that's a solid one. Let's see what else we can get here. And here we've got an anti-armor grenade launcher, with the last round in the magazine having 25% chance to deal double damage and breaking 50% slower. So the anti-armor effect is one of the best effects in the game, in my opinion. Its major drawback is that it doesn't do a whole lot against enemies that are already pretty squishy, don't have a whole lot of armor to protect them in the first place. So that's really not that much of a drawback, because enemies like that are typically going to go down pretty quickly, even with a non-legendary weapon. So that's really one of the least drawbacks as far as any of the weapons or the first star legendary effects go in the game. So, and the effect of it is very strong. It depends a bit on the weapon and your build and several other factors, because of the way armor penetration stacks. It doesn't stack, exactly. Like, if you've got a perk that gives you 36% armor penetration and you get an anti-armor effect, it's not giving you 86% armor penetration. The math is a little bit different than that, but it's still benefiting you. So overall, I like the anti-armor effect a lot. The second star, the last round of the magazine having 25% chance to deal double damage, is basically not having a second legendary effect at all, in my opinion. Most weapons I don't typically run until they are out of ammo. I typically reload them between battles whenever I have a moment. And if I'm using a core weapon like the Gatling Plasma or the Ultrasight Gatling Laser or something like that, where there is definitely a drawback to doing that, then yeah, I'll run them out, but getting that effect one time out of several hundred rounds, actually close to 1,000 rounds, even if you're just using the base ammo, the capacity of the weapon, like 250 times 4 is 1,000, and because you're going to get it once out of every last round, once out of every 4 last rounds. So yeah, basically just don't count on that effect to ever do anything for you at all. The break's 50% slower. That's a great effect because I don't think anybody's really into repairing their weapons. The grenade launcher I would prefer to see 90% reduced weight on, just because I don't think there's too many people going to be running around with the grenade launcher as their primary weapon most of the time. If you're doing that, I'd love to hear about it and hear your experiences, but overall, I don't think there's too many players doing that, so it seems like the kind of thing that most players would, if they had a 90% reduced weight version that was half decent, keep in their inventory, and, pull out when they find themselves with a whole bunch of 40mm grenades in their inventory that they want to get rid of, and just fire them at some things and have some fun blowing them up instead of just dropping them on the ground. I could see that being probably the most useful overall effect for the 3rd star. So overall, this one is on the lower side of mediocre, so definitely not exciting. Let's see what else we can get. And here we've got a Berserker's Black Powder Rifle with replenishing action points with each kill and +1 perception. So the Berserker's effect, it got a bit of a buff when they rebalanced the legendary effects a while back, so that it doesn't actually give you a major debuff when you're wearing armor. It just, the weapon functions like a non-legendary version at that point, which is really the way it should always have been, in my opinion. So that's a good thing, even though I don't really think that the Berserker's effect has the support that it needs to be truly effective. You can put a suit of legendary armor on with whatever legendary effects you want and have them broken so that you're not gaining any benefit from the protection of the armor, but you are still benefiting from the legendary effects on the armor. That is a valid way to do the Berserker's build, but even so, I still think it's going to be harder to stay alive with little to no armor versus, low health, such as the Bloodied build, because the Bloodied builds have so many perks and things like that to support them, to help them stay alive, that it's just much easier. I really feel like Berserkers could use some support in that regard, because Berserkers could be a very interesting build style if it was just had a little bit more to help it be better. The replenishing action points with each kill, again, that's a very good effect, but kind of like it being a bit lost on the bow if you drop out of VATS between every shot while you're reloading. It's going to be very similar here. In fact, it's going to be even more pronounced here because the reload animation on the Black Powder Rifle is going to be longer than the reload animation on the bow, so you're going to get more time for your AP to regenerate naturally if you do drop out of VATS between shots. So if you do it the way I do it, then you'll probably never run out of AP while using a Black Powder Rifle, so that 2nd star is really just not doing a whole lot for you. +1 perception is a solid 3rd star. It's not amazing by any means. Again, it's only +1 to the stat, which it'd be nice if they were at least +2 or +3 to the stats, but, whatever, I'm not Bethesda. But the primary benefit of the perception bonus is that it gives you a bit more VATS accuracy, which this is definitely the kind of weapon that I would use in VATS to try to take advantage of the weak points and the extra VATS VATS criticals doing some extra damage to get as many one-hit kills as possible, because you really want one-hit kills with this thing, because it would be very, very easy to get overwhelmed while using a Black Powder Rifle or pistol for that matter. So overall, this one is pretty unexciting. Let's see what else we can get. Now this one is genuinely interesting. Here we've got a quad short Radium Rifle with 25% faster fire rate and hits having a chance to generate a stealth field. So the quad effect is actually, for a long time I thought it was basically a junk effect. I never really valued it, but then I came around. I realize now that the DPS gain that it can provide is very, very strong, and the quad effect is really one of my favorite effects for almost any weapon. So this is a weapon that typically has around 20 in the magazine if you're using it in an automatic capacity, which is how I would use it. So, at the base. And so that would bring it up to 80. That really allows you to go for long periods of time without having to reload, either through a big battle area or just against a big boss or something like that. So very, very solid. Having 25% faster fire rate actually really benefits with the quad, because you are increasing your DPS again, your damage per second, just as with the quad effect, not the damage per shot. Neither of those increase that, but the damage per second is definitely increased by both the quad and the 25% faster fire rate, and they work very, very well together. So because you're able to get through that additional ammo capacity 25% faster, and then you're still spending the same amount of time reloading as before, so that's not bad at all. And then the hits having a chance to generate a stealth field, well, if you are having any sort of trouble staying in stealth, and if you're using a high rate of fire weapon with a faster fire rate, you may have a little bit more difficulty staying in stealth, just because every shot that you fire, whether it's suppressed or not, has at least a small chance of giving away your position. So if you're firing extra rounds, or firing them faster or whatever, then you do have a higher chance of being brought out of stealth. So that 3rd star actually could prove rather useful on this weapon. So this weapon I'm going to rate up there as very, very solid. Its major drawback being that it's a radium rifle, which the Radium Rifle is actually a very interesting and cool weapon. The biggest drawback with it is that it is just a massive pain to try to learn all of the mods for it so that you can mod it out the way that you want it. I have scrapped dozens and dozens of Radium Rifles on my character, and I know a fraction of the mods. So that's the big drawback there, but the weapon itself is very interesting, so thank you for that one, Murmur. Let's see what else we can get. And here we've got a Furious short laser pistol with plus 50% limb damage and faster movement speed while aiming. So the Furious effect is definitely one of my least favorite effects. It does have some value when you are using it on a high fire rate weapon, which if you modify this thing out to be fully automatic, whether you're using it as a pistol or a rifle, then you will see some benefit from it. And the laser pistols and rifles, whatever, the laser gun, did definitely get a little bit of a boost when they normalized or fixed, or whatever you want to call it, the damage of energy weapons versus energy resistance recently during the Alien Update patch. So that's a good thing, but they're still a little bit lower damage than most other weapons, so the Furious effect could actually be a little bit more useful on them, just because it's going to take some more weapons, or more shots, to put your typical enemy down, so that does give you some more time to build up the Furious charge, because you basically have to hit an enemy around 10 times to get the full benefit going forward of the Furious effect, because it starts off with 0% bonus on the first shot, then 5% on the second, 10% for the third, and so on until, I don't remember if it tops out at 40, 45, or 50. I think it's 50%, so that's solid, but it's just so hard to get up there unless you are facing a boss or something like that. It's going to just eat the rounds round after round. So the plus 50% limb damage is pretty unexciting in my opinion. This is the type of weapon that you could get a little bit more use out of it, just because it's a low damage weapon, and so getting some extra damage to the limbs may allow you to cripple them before they actually get to you. But overall, if you really want to cripple limbs, I think you're better off using the perks that give you a chance to cripple things rather than depending on a legendary effect to do it. So yeah, 2nd star is not amazing. And then 3rd star, definitely not exciting. Faster movement speed while aiming. If you're using the Speed Demon mutation, it's really doing nothing at all for you. And even if you're not using the Speed Demon mutation, then it's technically doing something for you all those times that you are moving around while holding the aim button. I don't think too many players do a whole lot of that, maybe a little bit, but not a ton, so I just don't see where it's doing a whole lot. So yeah, let's go ahead and move on to the next one. We've got 2 more here. Let's see what we can get. Okay, this one's interesting. We've got a Bloodied Gatling Plasma with plus 50% VATS hit chance, and hits have a chance to generate a stealth field. So the Bloodied effect I already talked about is, in my opinion, the best in general 1st star in the game for really both ranged and melee weapons, but really for almost anything that's not like, you know, Tesla rifles I would prefer quad on, and a few other situations, but generally speaking, Bloodied is my favorite 1st star, so that's great, love it. It's the extra best damage bonus in the game. The plus 50% VATS hit chance, I think most players would be pretty disappointed with that 2nd star on a Gatling Plasma, and I am a little bit, but at the same time, I actually have a friend who has done some experimenting with using the Gatling plasma in VATS and has had some pretty solid effect, or some pretty solid successes with using it, especially with the plus 50% VATS hit chance. So because of that, it's kind of interesting. I may actually take this thing out for a spin one day on a weapon spotlight video. But yeah, and then the hits having a chance to generate a stealth field, I don't really think that that's going to be enough to truly keep you in stealth with a weapon like this, but I could be wrong, and if I am, then that could make this thing very, very interesting, because it may allow you to be basically a stealth-heavy gunner in a sense. So, kind of interesting. I think it's a bit far-fetched, but I think it might be worth trying out someday, so I'm probably going to hold on to this one and do a bit of experimenting with it. So, anyway, let's see what we get for our last one. I think I already did 10 actually, but I'm not certain, so let's do one more. And here we've got an Executioner's crossbow with bashing damage increased by 50% and breaks 50% slower. So the Executioner's effect is, I talked about that earlier, it's a very interesting effect. It's most beneficial on low damage, fast fire rate weapons, because it'll really save you some rounds on a larger number of enemies than high damage, low fire rate weapons. So something like this is really only going to have any real potential use against big enemies, like maybe, you know, behemoths, Mirelurk Queen, Scorch Beast Queen, you know, Earl, things like that. So it could be pretty powerful, potentially, when it is, but I just really don't think the Executioner's effect is good for these slow-firing weapons like this. The bashing damage increased by 50%. That is, for the most part, like not having a second effect on the weapon. The big exception is the minigun. If you put a Shredder mod on it, then the second star bashing damage increased by 50% is actually very good. It'll do a lot of extra damage if you're using it that way as a melee weapon. And pretty much every other instance, it's not doing much of anything for you. And obviously this is not a minigun, so it's not doing much of anything for us here. The breaks 50% slower. You know, I don't think that it's going to do a whole lot on this weapon, because this weapon has a slower fire rate, but even so, it's never a bad thing, like I've said before, because I don't think anybody's all that into repairing their weapons. So yeah, it's not terrible, but overall this thing is more or less a dud. So at least we did get one half-decent weapon today in the quad-short Radium Rifle here, so I do appreciate that, Murmur, and I definitely appreciate you all tuning in. Please remember, if you enjoyed my content, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps the channel out and doesn't cost any money. And until next time, thank you for watching.